They must make a deal, or if that doesn't happen, I maybe can understand. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But
tonight we begin with a development that U.S. officials, defense analysts, and regional security experts had feared, tracked, and prepared for. A move that unfolded not over weeks or months, but in a matter of hours. Hours that changed the military calculus across the Persian Gulf. Hours that put Allied forces on the highest alert seen in years. Hours that forced Washington into decisions it had hoped to avoid entirely. What Iran did today crossed a line that American commanders had hoped would hold. And when that line broke, the United States did not hesitate. They responded with speed, precision, and overwhelming force. For months now, there had been signals, not official statements, not formal declarations, just signals, that Iran was preparing something unusually coordinated. Tehran has been provocative, yes, but they have been methodical in their provocation. Their moves have followed a certain rhythm, a pattern, almost a doctrine. But what set off alarm bells in the Pentagon this week was that the rhythm went silent. Intelligence analysts who monitor Iranian military activity know the indicators. The movement of radar systems along the coast, the repositioning of fast attack vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, the activation of air defense batteries in the southwest, and the sudden disappearance of communication chatter from known Revolutionary Guard command nodes. All of that went quiet, and whenever Iran goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. Early this morning, U.S. Central Command detected what they described as an unprecedented surge in Iranian Air Force readiness, including the forward deployment of advanced fighter aircraft to southern bases that had not been activated in over 2 years. These are the kinds of assets that Iran only moves when they are signaling something very specific, a willingness to escalate, a desire to test American resolve, or preparation for a first strike posture. Military observers didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Iran was changing its strategic posture. And when a nation-state shifts its military posture without explanation, even by a narrow margin, the United States pays very close attention. The response issued by U.S. Central Command tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Official after briefing described Iran's move as destabilizing, deliberately provocative, and perhaps most importantly, operationally actionable in a way that left no room for diplomatic ambiguity. But intimidation only works if the target hesitates. The United States did not. In fact, Washington's response today was among the most decisive and rapid deployments we have seen in the region in over a decade. Within hours of Iran's initial repositioning, the U.S. military surged a significant package of fifth-generation fighter jets, including F-22 Raptors and F-35s, to air bases across the Gulf. These weren't the standard forward-deployed assets. These were combat-configured strike packages, aircraft loaded with systems that the U.S. only deploys when it is preparing to transition from deterrence to active engagement. Tonight, defense sources confirmed that the United States repositioned carrier strike group assets into the northern Arabian Sea, including guided missile destroyers that had recently been held back from the region for what analysts believe was a deliberate attempt to lower tensions. The Pentagon moved before Iran could complete its own operational setup. They established air superiority corridors over international waters adjacent to Iranian airspace. They repositioned intelligence-gathering platforms that were likely providing real-time targeting data on Iran's newly activated southern air bases. They surged electronic warfare assets that were likely designed to degrade Iran's ability to coordinate a synchronized strike package. In other words, the U.S. targeted Iran's decision-making infrastructure, the command and control architecture that would have made any Iranian first move operational. This is what made Washington's warning so urgent. Iran's surge wasn't just symbolic. it was actionable. It represented the kind of repositioning that could trigger a miscalculation leading to open conflict if left unchecked. And the United States, understanding that fully, responded with force, not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't chase false targets. They didn't overextend their footprint. They hit the choke points. They hit the corridors. And here's where the story becomes even more alarming. Intelligence analysts now believe that Iran's latest move was designed to test the readiness and political will of American forces after a period of perceived diplomatic distraction in Washington. Tehran wanted to see whether the United States would blink, pull back, or delay its response pending political consultation. But instead, the opposite happened. American commanders didn't wait for a second assessment. They launched a response so immediate, so coordinated, that even Iran's own military planners noticed the shift in American posture. You don't get Tehran's attention easily, but today, the United States did. Regional security analysts, speaking with international media under conditions of anonymity, described Iran's provocation as a calibrated probe, a way to map American reaction time and test the cohesion of Gulf defense partnerships. But Washington proved today that it remains both ready and resolute. Their deployments were not only rapid, they were layered so precisely that Iranian radar systems reportedly struggled to track the full scope of American air movement in real time. That layering matters because it shows that U.S. forces in the region are not sitting in a defensive crouch. They are operating from a position of active forward deterrence. As reports continued coming in throughout the day, we learned more about the scale of the American response. Naval assets in the Gulf of Oman carried out coordinated repositioning maneuvers, forcing Iranian coastal defense batteries to recalculate their targeting solutions. Air Force units based in Qatar targeted surveillance corridors that had been established by Iranian drones in the last 72 hours. Special operations elements operating across the northern Gulf reportedly disrupted communication relays used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy to coordinate swarm boat tactics. This wasn't just a show of force. This wasn't just a military flex. This was strategic suffocation. This was domain denial. And domain denial is the one thing Iran has struggled to counter since the collapse of its nuclear negotiating leverage. For every asymmetric advance they have made in the region, the United States has countered with something that collapses the operational window before Iran can exploit it. Remember, Iran's leadership thought the window of American distraction was wide open. They thought Gulf partners were fractured and slow to respond. They thought a calibrated provocation would go unanswered long enough to create facts on the ground. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. American forces are unified and forward-positioned. Gulf partners are coordinating in real time, and Iran's provocation has produced not hesitation, but acceleration of the very American military presence Tehran was hoping to deter. What makes this moment so volatile and so consequential is that Iran's latest move happened at a time when Supreme Leader Khamenei is under enormous internal pressure. Hardliners want escalation and a demonstration of Persian regional dominance. Moderates want breathing room to pursue back-channel economic relief. The Revolutionary Guard wants operational autonomy and the freedom to project force without civilian interference, and Iran's proxy network wants reassurance that Tehran still has the will to lead. Khamenei is balancing these demands while managing an economy strangled by sanctions and a domestic population increasingly skeptical of endless confrontation. And when leaders in that position make sudden military moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Iran's latest move wasn't isolated. Along with the fighter jet surge, Hezbollah in Lebanon also increased drone reconnaissance flights along the northern Israeli border. Iranian-backed Houthi forces in Yemen escalated ballistic missile targeting drills aimed at Saudi infrastructure. And IRGC-affiliated militias in Iraq increased communications traffic targeting U.S. forward operating bases. All of this happened within the same 48-hour window. When Iran moves multiple pieces across the board simultaneously, it means something larger is being orchestrated from the top. Analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Iran is preparing a coordinated multi-front pressure campaign designed to stretch American response capacity across multiple theaters simultaneously. Another is that Iran is attempting to force a diplomatic opening by raising the cost of continued military presence high enough to compel negotiation. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Iran is attempting to establish a new baseline of military positioning that gradually normalizes its presence in international corridors it currently does not control. But today, the United States took that card off the table. They didn't issue a statement and wait. They didn't convene an emergency session and deliberate. They didn't send a diplomatic note and hope for restraint. They moved iron. They moved it fast. And they moved it in numbers that sent an unmistakable message. What we're watching now is a test of strategic patience. Iran wants to see whether American domestic politics will limit the duration and intensity of any military response. The United States wants to show that its commitment to Gulf security is unconditional and immediate, regardless of the political season in Washington. American allies in the region want to prevent this from becoming a direct military exchange that reshapes the security architecture they depend on. And Iran's own population wants to prevent a conflict that their leadership may be sleepwalking into under the illusion of controlled escalation. Tonight, we've heard from multiple intelligence and defense officials who are now conducting continuous real-time monitoring of Iranian military communications and movement. They say Iran has not yet stood down its southern air assets. They say the carrier strike group repositioning has been noted and analyzed by Iranian command. And they say Iran's decision to surge its fighter jets to southern bases is likely part of a broader strategic signaling campaign intended to reshape the terms of any future nuclear or regional security dialogue. But the United States is not reading that signal as an invitation to negotiate. In fact, the United States is reading it as a provocation that demands a visible, sustained, and unambiguous response. Their move today, rapid, layered, and overwhelming in its scope, sent a message to Tehran that American deterrence in this region is not theoretical. And it sent a message to every American ally in the Gulf that Washington remains the ultimate guarantor of regional security, regardless of what is happening anywhere else in the world.